Hello, grade 4 students. This is Miss Faten, and this is our third science lecture video. First of all, I will go for a quick revision about trees, shrubs, and herbs, and also about cultivated and wild plants. According to their sizes and to the type of their stems, plants are classified into three groups. I'll start with the trees. Trees have a large size and they have one woody stem that we call a trunk, and sometimes it is called the style. These plants live for more than 2 years, so they are perennial. Shrubs are plants with a medium size. These plants do not have only one stem, but many woody stems. They also live for more than 2 years, so they are perennial. Herbs are plants with a small size. They have green, flexible, and hollow stems, but these plants are not perennial. Some herbs aren't small in size, like the banana tree and the bamboo plant, but they are considered as herb because of their green stem. So the banana plant. All of these plants, trees, shrubs, and herbs are living things, so they have needs to grow and to live. Some of these needs are sunlight, air, water, and minerals. When we care for the plant and give it what it needs, when we water it, when we take care of its land, when we make sure to put it in a sunny area and to provide it with clean air, we call the plant or we consider it as a cultivated plant. Wild plants are those growing in the wild around us without us caring for them. So you know now that plants are classified into trees, shrubs, and herbs, and we have cultivated and wild plants. The oleander plant is a plant with a medium size and with many woody stems, and this plant is perennial. It is a shrub that we see around us and in the nature. It is wild. As you can see, this plant grows flower, it blooms. So look at these pretty pink parts of the plant. These are the plant's flowers. So the oleander plant is an example of flowering plants, while fern plants and pine trees are examples of non-flowering plants. You need to know that most plants on earth, most trees, most shrubs, most herbs are flowering, meaning that they grow flowers, but we still have plants that do not make flowers at all. Today's lesson is about flowering plants, and to be more specific, it's about the function of each part of a flower. Here are some examples of flowers: the gardenia flower, the apple tree flower, and the lily flower. The flower is the reproductive organ of a plant. What do we mean by reproduction? It's making new plants out of one plant. It is making babies. Us people, we reproduce, we make babies. Animals reproduce. Plants also, they are living things and they are reproduced. They make babies. The seeds are the baby plants. So seeds are baby plants. Flowers are reproductive organs of the plant. It's the part where the plant grows its seeds. Reproduction happens in flowers, and all the parts of a flower are engaged in this process. Let's start with the Parts found on the outside of a flower, the parts that we can clearly see. A flower shows colorful parts and it shows green parts, parts that look like leaves, but they are called sepals. Petals are colorful. So these petals, the petals are colorful and they have also beautiful smell. So they are not only colorful, they also have beautiful smell or scent. Why is that? Why do they need their colors and their smell for? It's to attract animals such as butterflies, such as bees. These animals are super important. We will discover their job in the coming slides. The sepals look like leaves. So they are leaf-like structures, leaf-like parts. So they look like leaves and their job is to protect the flower as it's growing, when the flower is a bud. Both petals and sepals are important for the plant. Petals are colorful with a beautiful smell. They attract insects to the plant. Sepals are green and they protect the flower as it grows. Here we have a petal, the second, the third, and the fourth petal. All of these are petals with beautiful colors and beautiful smells. These are the sepals protecting the flower as it grows. What about this part, this fat part, and the line connected to the fat part and the head? This is the carpel or pistil, which is the female part of the flower. So it's the female organ. It's the female part. Okay? The female part is made of 3 different parts. It includes the stigma, then this line, which is the style, and then the fat part, the ovary. The ovary holds and carries the ovules inside. Say the word with me. Ovules. Ovules are super important, but ovules alone cannot make the seeds. So ovules are needed and important to make the seeds, but they are not enough. Okay? So again, the female organ, the female part, has 2 names. We call this part a carpel or a pistil. The carpel or the pistil has 3 parts: stigma, style, and ovary. Why is the ovary so important? Because it is carrying the ovules inside. What about the male part? These are the stamens. So this flower contains many stamens. The stamen is the male part of the flower. So I'll write here, it is the male part of the flower. And this part consists of 2 parts. The line, the body of the male part, which is the filament. And we have the yellow heads. Let me circle some for you. This is a yellow head. This is another one. This is a third one. They are obvious and clear to us. So these are the anthers. Anthers are important because they hold the pollen grains. Here are the pretty petals, the sepals, the carpel or the pistil, which is standing in the middle of the flower with its stigma, the style, and the ovary, inside the flower, which is the fat part holding the ovules. Here are the stamens with their anther and with their filament. How is the seed formed? Look at this. Here is the pistil standing in the middle. It is the green part of this flower. It is standing in the middle with its stigma. So let me highlight it for you. Can you see the stigma? The stigma is the head of the female part. This is the stigma. Then we have this line or road. This is the style. And then we have the fat part down, which is the ovary. So this is the ovary. What are these? These are the ovules held by the ovary. So here are the ovules. On another side, we have let me see, we have 6 stamens. So here are the stamens. This is 1, 2, 3. And on the second side, 1, 2, 3. So we have here 6 stamens. 6 stamens with their anther, the yellow anther holding the yellow pollen, and the line, which is the filament. This is the line holding the anther. What happens? The pollen found on the anther must meet the ovules. So here is the answer, the anther. On the anther, there are pollen grains. Pollen grains. The pollen grains must meet the ovules inside. Here are the ovules. We need something or someone to move the pollen grains from the anther to the stigma, as you can see in here. As you can see, look at the arrows. Pollen grains should be taken from the anther and to the stigma. Once pollen grains reach the stigma, they will use the style to go down and meet the ovules inside the ovary. That's what we call pollination. What's pollination? It is the process of transferring pollen grains from the anther to the stigma. When the pollen grains meet the ovules, so I will add here pollen grains plus ovules, pollen grains plus ovules. What will this combination give? We'll have a baby formed, which is the seed finally. So this is the result of pollination, when pollen grains are moved from the boy, from the anther, the male anther, to the female stigma. When the pollen meets the ovule, we will have a baby, which is the seed. Now, whose job is to move pollen grains from the anther to the stigma? It is the pollinator's job. Bees, flies are examples of pollinators or pollen helpers. So we call them pollinators or pollen helpers. These animals help in pollinating the plant. Their job is to move pollen grains from the anther to the stigma. Let's together label, okay, my mistake. Let's together label a flower. and see the different parts of a flower engaged in pollination. Okay. Type the words in the block to label the picture. Here we have a flower with its different parts. Let's label it. Start with the first one. What do we call the purple part of a flower? What is it? It's the petal. Yes. Second, we have the head of the pistil standing in the middle. So all of this is the pistil. Its head is the stigma. Okay. Stigma. The stigma is connected to the style. And the style leads to the ovary of the plant. Or no, the arrow is, this is the anther. So the arrow is pointing to the head of the boy. So it's pointing to this one, to the yellow head. So this is the anther. This arrow is pointing to the leaf-like structure. What do we call this part? It's the sepal. And inside the ovary, we have the ovule. Let's check.
Keep going. Well done. You have completed this game.
Great. How pollination happens? Let me show you a simulation of how pollination happens in plants. Pollination is super important because it takes pollen grains from the anther to the female stigma. So the bees, it took the pollen from the anther to the stigma. Look at the pollen grain going down using the style to the ovary, and then we have a seed formed. Let's continue now with the lesson and back to this. What do we mean by flowering plants? Most plants on earth are flowering plants, meaning that they grow flowers. And for sure, you know that flowers' job is to make seeds inside, is to help the plant reproduce. What about pollination? This definition is super important. So pollination is the act of moving pollen from where? From the male anther, from the boy, from the male anther. So I'll put it in blue. To the female stigma, from the male to the female. All parts of the flower are engaged in the pollination process or in the reproduction process. How is that? Petals. Petals are super important because they have colors, they have a beautiful smell to attract the animals. Animals are important, as we saw. Bees, flies, some birds, moths, and other animals are important because they help in the pollination process. So petals attract animals, and then animals help in pollination. What about sepals? Sepals are also important because they protect the flower as it grows. The carpel, which is the female part, the carpel is also called a pistil. So this carpel is made of 3 parts. The stigma. The stigma receives the pollen grains. The animal will take the pollen grains from the anther to the stigma. Then pollen grains will go down through the style. In the ovary, we have the ovules. So the ovary holds the ovules. It holds the ovules inside. The stamen. The stamen is the boy. It has an anther. The anther holds the pollen grains, and we have the filament holding the anther. So let me write next to the anther is it holds the pollen grains. Ovules and pollen grains need to meet, and when they meet, they form the seed. Okay, so that's all. If you still have any question about the lesson, I'm always available. Okay, bye-bye grade 4.